Alright, today I'm going to be testing the Intel i3-2120 in Palworld. You can see all of the computer specs here in Task Manager, as well as CPU-Z and GPU-Z and MSI Afterburner. The boot drive and the game drive are both SSDs. Either way, without further ado, let's get into the game. Starting off is 1080p on the very low settings, and when I play on the very low settings in this game, the game looks alright. I mean, it doesn't look good, but at least for an old game standard, it looks decent, I guess. Either way, the game was getting 47 frames per second, and the 1% low was 20. So the 1% low was pretty low. The game did stutter at times, but the game does stutter. It doesn't matter what hardware I use, it just stutters because why not, I guess. Either way, the game was still pretty playable. It seems like it runs nicely. 47 frames per second on average is actually pretty playable in this game, so yeah, I can't really complain much. Alright, so 1080p on the normal low settings, the game was getting 45 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 19. The stutters were still there, they weren't really much worse than before, and the frame rate actually didn't drop all that much, which is very nice. Now, keep in mind we are using a high-end graphics card here on a low-end CPU, so if you have, let's say, a low-end CPU with a low-end graphics card, this will actually impact the frame rate, but here it seems to not really affect it all that much, and it looks better, so hey, if you have a fast graphics card, I guess play at 1080p on the low settings here. It looks good, and doesn't run much worse than very low. So I tried 1080p on the medium settings next, and this time it hit the frame rate quite a bit. So instead of having a roughly 20 frame per second 1% low, it was 5. The stutters were huge, and the average frame rate, yeah, only went down like 5 more frames per second, but the stutters really put the experience to a little bit of a lower level because 5 frames per second is extraordinarily low. And to add to that, the game doesn't really look much better than the low settings. So yeah, play on low instead of medium. Next up, I tried 1080p on the high settings, and doing so, well, the performance was actually rather weird. It still had big stutters, but instead of a 5 frame per second 1% low, it had a 12 frame per second 1% low, which is an improvement of over 100%, which is awesome. Though the average frame rate stayed exactly the same, so there's not really, I guess, any noticeable difference between medium and high in terms of performance. But I would still stick to the low settings because there's not really much of a difference visually between low and high. At least to me, there's not much of a difference. Next up, I tried, well, the last possible setting I could try actually. It is 1080p on the very high settings. And this is really weird, so the average frame rate was, again, 40. So the 1% lows, they are higher than the medium settings. The 1% lows are 20. For context, medium was 5, high was 12, and very high is 20. So very high was more smooth than high and medium. I don't know how that works. Either way, the very high settings don't give much of a visual improvement, at least to me, over the low settings, and the low settings performed a bit better, minus the 1% lows. So I recommend just sticking to the low settings. Either way, if this video is informative or something, make sure to leave a like. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.